New Orleans has a very historic and creepy past, such as the Axeman, who from May 1918 through October 1919, murdered or attacked a dozen people, usually by breaking into their houses and killing them while they were asleep. He was never caught. Even today the crimes remain unsolved. The LaLaurie Mansion. Owned by Delphine LaLaurie, who was a New Orleans socialite and serial killer, known for torturing and murdering in her home. After a fire, her crimes were discovered, and a mob attacked her house. LaLaurie fled during the mob violence. Both these stories were used in the third season of the TV series American Horror Story. See the links below for more. The Sultan's Palace, also known as the Garde at La Prete House, is one of New Orleans' most compelling ghost stories in the French Quarter. According to legend, a mass murder was committed in this mansion, including the brother of a Turkish sultan, who was buried alive. Lafitte's blacksmith shop, one of the oldest and most haunted buildings in New Orleans' French Quarter, is certainly one of the city's creepiest bars. Almost the entire bar is lighted by candlelight at night. The ghost of the shop is that of Jean Lafitte. He is said to haunt there, as well as several other spirits. The Jazz Club Mahogany. The Mahogany Jazz Club, on the western side of the French Quarter, was formerly a popular hangout for gangsters and other unsavory characters, and has long been the scene of unusual occurrences. Staff and guests of the nightclub have claimed regular paranormal encounters. The historic Morgue. The city of New Orleans was plagued by yellow fever outbreaks during the 19th century. Hospitals were overflowing, and graves had waiting lists. Because there was nowhere to keep the deceased while they were awaiting burial, impromptu morgues sprung up all around the French Quarter. Homes were turned into holding centers for the dead. There is practically no sign of these previous morgues today. Despite the fact that these are no longer morgues, the spirits refuse to go away. And the list of haunted places and strange events goes on and on. But by far the most haunted is that of the St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. The oldest existing cemetery site in New Orleans is St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. Established by a Spanish royal order on August 14, 1789, is the oldest cemetery open to both locals and tourists. It's also known for being one of the most haunted cemeteries in the country. This burial cemetery has approximately 700 tombs, and over 100,000 dead people, and it is still an active burying site. The cemetery was given the nickname the City of the Dead by the famous author Mark Twain because of its decaying appearance. Actor Nicolas Cage bought a pyramid-shaped mausoleum there in 2010, for his eventual final resting place. He also owned the LaLaurie Mansion at one point, but later sold it. But who haunts this cemetery? Many stories have been reported over the years, but some of the most frightening include Marie Laveau. The grave of Marie Laveau, the legendary voodoo queen, is one of the most famous and undoubtedly the most significant reason why people visit the cemetery. A Creole mother and a white father gave birth to this lady in 1801. She grew up to be a gorgeous and attractive young woman, who was well known for her hairdressing abilities. Laveau had studied a variety of natural and herbal treatments while serving the affluent and famous of her day. She was infamous for her voodoo ritualism, and she was regarded by many in her community as a nice and kind woman, who utilized her voodoo to aid others. She died in her own house, at the age of 80 in 1881. She had an elaborate burial with many locals attending. However, it was said that she was spotted throughout town after her death, with some claiming that they still see her spirit today. The 3 X's are supposed to still be visible if you view the tomb. These are claimed to have been placed by persons who require Laveau's assistance. According to legend, if you draw an X on her tomb, spin 3 times, knock 3 times, and speak out your desire, she will grant it. If your desire was granted, you were to return, circle the X, and make an offering at the tomb's foot to express your gratitude. Although she was known for her compassion in life, things may be different on the other side of the grave. Visitors to the cemetery, who have expressed their unbelief in the voodoo queen's activities and religion, have allegedly been shoved, scratched, and thrown to the ground near her grave. Others say they saw her going around the cemetery before she vanished. Many people think that her death didn't stop her from practicing black magic and wielding dark abilities. Some claim she transforms into a large black dog or a black crow. Both of these creatures have been spotted at the cemetery. A side fact, she was portrayed by actress Angela Bassett in American Horror Story Season 3, for which she received an Emmy nomination. Alphonse, this man's life history is not well known, and most of his background is lost to time. Despite this, his presence at the cemetery is known, and sightings of his ghost are very common. Alphonse's spirit wanders the halls of St. Louis Cemetery, looking for a last resting place. He's been known to grab guests' hands and draw them to a halt, then he says he wants to be taken home. He also has a habit of taking flowers from recently spruced graves, and laying them on his own forgotten tomb. He instructs visitors to keep away from the Pinad family mausoleum, because they are suspected of being the ones who killed him. Or perhaps Alphonse is just one of the cemetery's hundreds, if not thousands, of phantom Civil War soldiers or yellow fever victims. The tomb, or lack thereof, of sailor Henry Vignet is another destination for visitors. The sailor was homeless and lived on the streets until he found a boarding house in New Orleans. Vignet carried crucial paperwork with him, including his family's tombstone's papers, and asked the boarding house owner to keep them safe while he went on a voyage. The owner sold the tombs while he was abroad, leaving Vignet with no family plots. He was believed to be trying to rectify the problem after he returned and realized what had occurred, but he became ill soon after. He died soon after and was buried in an unmarked grave at the St. Louis Cemetery, because he had no family tomb. Even though Henry Vignet was buried over a century ago, hauntings linked to him are still common. Visitors to the cemetery have reported seeing a man with blue eyes, asking where the Vignet tomb is, and several have claimed to have spoken with the spirit himself. On several instances, he has been captured on video and has been heard exclaiming, "I need to rest," to the unknowing visitor or tour guides. He appears in full solid form, and appearing very much alive. He's described as being tall, wearing a white shirt, and having piercing blue eyes, and he's still hunting for his family's lost vault, or a spot in someone else's vault, so he can be properly buried. Witnesses at the cemetery have said that the spirit of Henry will approach an unsuspecting individual and inquire if they know where his family's old vault is located. He then moves away and then vanishes. "Do you know anything about this tomb here?" he says. "This entity will occasionally tap the living on the shoulder." Henry has asked mourners whether there is any room in the vault during family funerals. Paul Morphy, known as the unofficial world chess champion, possessed a natural skill that was unheard of in the 19th century. His talent for the game spread across the country, especially when he completed and won a 10-hour match, while facing away and having the pieces moved for him by attendants. He continued to play chess after this famous encounter, but his heart was no longer in it. He opened a legal office in an attempt to change occupations, but his potential clients were only interested in a game of chess. Frustrated, he ultimately closed his practice for good. Morphy had a break with reality later in life, fearing being poisoned and watched. He had unusual habits, such as following unknown people for hours, and eating only meals cooked by his mother or sister. He supposedly roamed around the streets of the French Quarter, naked and holding an axe in the late 1870s, threatening to murder anybody who crossed him. In 1884, he succumbed to mental health problems and suffered a stroke in his bathtub. He is said to walk the cemetery usually at night, looking confused and troubled, and shying away from visitors. And Madame LaLaurie, as we previously mentioned. A fire broke out in Madame LaLaurie's Grand Mansion's kitchen on April 10, 1834. Several servants had been starved, tortured, and imprisoned in the attic when rescuers arrived. The mansion was plundered, and nearly demolished as word of the abuse went throughout the community. The facts of this terrible incident were covered in newspapers across the country. Madame LaLaurie and her family apparently fled to France in the middle of the mayhem. A cracked copper plate with the inscription "Madame LaLaurie, born Marie Delphine McCarthy, died in Paris, December 7, 1842, was discovered in Alley 4 of St. Louis Cemetery in the late 1930s. Although records show she died in France on December 7, 1849, some believe she is buried in the blank tomb at St. Louis. Despite the plaque and documents, it was generally believed that while LaLaurie made it to Paris, but then she returned to New Orleans, and resumed her reign of terror under a new identity. Whether the reports are true or not, many have reported her presence there. It has been described as a very dark presence, and people have reported negative energy associated with the spirit. It has also been claimed her victims roam the cemetery, as well as her house and the streets in the area, looking for their freedom. She has also been reported to haunt her former mansion. There are many other reports of other spirits haunting this site. Some have been identified, while others have not. Several paranormal experts and ghost hunters have claimed to have photographed spirits there, as well as having picked up recordings of disembodied voices and sounds. Because of its proximity to a bad area, it resulted in several robberies. Criminals would rob visitors in the tiny alleyways in between the vaults. So the cemetery is surrounded by a high wall. Unlike most other New Orleans cemeteries, St. Louis Cemetery is accessible only to families of those entombed there, and through the official licensed guided tour. This is because the cemetery has been vandalized several times throughout the years. So what do you think of St. Louis Cemetery? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, please like and subscribe.